Welcome to episode 6 of the Mastering Your Fertility podcast. This show is all about reclaiming health, enhancing fertility, and preparing for pregnancy. I'm Kristin Cornett. I have my co-host, Dr. Haylee Nye, here with me. We are the creators of the online fertility platform, Tiny Feet. As always, thank you so much for listening. We're so glad you're here, and we hope you learned something that can help you on your health and fertility journey. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about sleep. Most of us probably view lack of sleep as an unfortunate reality of having a busy life, but we're here to tell you that getting enough sleep really isn't optional if you want to live a healthy lifestyle, and especially if you're trying to get pregnant. So we're going to teach you why sleep is so important to your health and how it can help you enhance your fertility through things like balancing your hormones, boosting your metabolism, and taming inflammation in your body. We'll also give you a ton of specific actionable steps to help you increase the amount of sleep you're getting and improve your sleep quality. So let's jump right in. We're going to start off with Dr. Haylee, and she's going to tell us why we sleep and what our bodies do during rest.
So in sleep, there's 4 different stages, and it's 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Really?
Yes. And with stage 3, that is the stage that you get the deepest sleep. And so during this stage of restorative sleep, our blood pressure is going to drop, breathing slows down, and surprisingly, our neurons are actually going to shrink in size. And our blood flow is going to move more towards our muscles and tissues in order to help them repair, while the brain is actually getting cleaned up.
Okay.
And so this is about 20% of our time sleeping during the night is going to be in stage 3. And that's usually going to happen more in the beginning of the night.
Okay.
And then we spend more time in REM sleep, which is stage 4, or rapid eye movement. And that's going to be more towards the morning. So you might recognize that you'll have more vivid dreams in the morning time.
Right before you wake up?
Yes.
Like, oh, what was that?
Exactly. That is REM sleep.
Okay.
And so during this stage, like when your neurons are actually shrinking, I find this so fascinating that it's actually creating room for those microglia cells, which are kind of like the garbage trucks, to come in and clean up from the day's work. And so the more time and energy that we spend in our brain, cognitive activity or even exercise activity, the more what's called byproducts are being created in our brain, and it's waste. And so our brain is constantly on all day long, that we don't get time to be able to clean out that waste during the daytime. And so sleep is really that time where you get to come in and clean out all that byproduct and be able to start afresh the next day.
So this could be why when people don't get enough sleep, they kind of feel brain foggy, they have trouble remembering things, they're just clearly not mentally functioning the way that they would be if they were rested.
Exactly. Think about that garbage can just totally overflowing and needs to be taken out.
It's kind of gross.
Yeah.
Thinking about that in your brain.
So while the neurons are resting and repairing themselves from a hard day's work, some other things are going on as well. So during this time, during the short wave sleep is what they call it, stage 3, all of our memories or things that happen during that day are going to be incorporated into long-term memories. And so this is just quick bursts of brain activity, or they also call it spindles, where they're basically transferring information from neurons that are in your hypothalamus and taking it into different parts of the brain and storing them. And then your neurons will also get rid of information that they know that they don't need. And so they also use REM sleep in order to be able to process everything that happened during the day. And that's what, sometimes our dreams are just so weird because it's actually processing like, oh, do I need that? Is that important? And did it have an emotional attachment to that particular memory? And so it's really interesting that our body's being able to sort all that out while we're sleeping.
Kind of reminds me of the movie 50 First Dates.
Yes.
Where like it's Lucy, right?
Yeah.
She's not able to convert that short-term memory into long-term memory. So she never remembers the guy that she's dating the next day. I think that's kind of funny, but that could really happen.
Clearly was not having a stage 3 or stage 4 of sleep.
I guess not. Traumatic brain injury, whatever.
And so lastly, something else that is happening, which is more of newer research that's coming out, is the regulation of appetite of our hormones, leptin and ghrelin. And so that's where they're finding that actually lack of sleep can lead to obesity, metabolic syndrome, so high blood pressure, and also inability to lose weight.
Right.
Because your ghrelin hormone is going to be more prominent during the day if you're not getting enough sleep.
So that's the one that tells you that you're hungry, I need to eat more. So like increased appetite could be increased ghrelin. And then it suppresses your leptin, which is your satiation hormone, the one that tells you that you're full and it's time to stop eating.
Yes.
Very interesting. The liver is really active during sleep as well, right? Kind of all that detoxification.
Yeah. So all those byproducts that I was talking to you about during that time where it's being cleaned out is actually going through what's called the glymphatic system. And the G in glymphatic means it stands for the microglia cells that are going through and cleaning things out.
The lymphatic system of the brain, basically.
Exactly. And then it goes into the lymphatic system, and that lymphatic system is just dumped into our liver for processing, and then, goes to our exit routes.
All right. So our bodies kind of know when it's time to be awake and alert and when it's time to relax and go to sleep. It's kind of like a different sort of biological clock than the one that we're used to thinking about in terms of fertility. So why don't you talk about kind of that natural rhythm and how that works?
Yeah, our bodies love rhythms, right? So our hormones work in rhythms, and our biological clock is a rhythm. And then every day to day is a rhythm through our other hormones. And so in particularly cortisol and melatonin.
Okay.
So cortisol is going to be higher in the morning time. So in that couple of hours before you wake up in the morning, it starts to rise and peak. And then it's slowly going to go down throughout the daytime. And at night, it's going to be the lowest. And then melatonin is actually the opposite. So it's going to be the lowest in the morning and then start to rise over the day and be the highest at night. And so these opposite effects of what's going on is called our sleep-wake cycle. So cortisol is connected to being awake, and melatonin is connected to being asleep. And so there's many things that can happen that can disrupt the sleep-wake cycle, right? And Kristin's going to talk more about that. But cortisol, what it does is it's going to regulate your stress response. It regulates your blood sugar levels, your metabolism, and then also your inflammation. And then melatonin is produced when the body senses darkness and helps induce that sleep at night. It also acts as an antioxidant and is an important regulatory hormone for the female menstrual cycle. So that's really interesting as well.
Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? If your body operates on a cycle where you have anywhere from 26 to 35 days, your body kind of has to know what is a day, right? So you kind of need that hormonal message to tell you when cortisol is low and melatonin is high and it's time to sleep. And it's really fascinating.
So the research also is showing that because melatonin is an antioxidant, and it also is connected to that cleaning up system that's going on in the brain at night, and then also in your body, right? The repairing cells and restoring and getting ready for the next day. And so we need these hormones to be balanced to have a healthy sleep and wake cycle in order to, again, feel refreshed and alert the next morning and relaxed and sleepy in the evening. And so if you feel like you're, that you can't get to sleep, or you're feeling just really hyperactive the night before, right? That could be that your cortisol is off and that you have too high of cortisol. And then your melatonin actually hasn't had a chance to rise too. So those two hormones are the curve is off.
Okay. And that could also be the reason that somebody might just be totally dragging in the morning, like just barely able to get out of bed. Their cortisol isn't rising enough in the morning to help them feel awake and alert.
Yes, that's very common.
So I don't know if we mentioned this, but this sleep-wake cycle, this hormonal balance that we're talking about, is referred to as your circadian rhythms. And you guys may have heard of this term before. It's probably why nobody really feels very good for at least a week after daylight savings happens. because it's like this total disruption to your body being used to this routine, this normal hormonal balance at certain times of the day when it's light versus when it's dark. And when you mess that up, you feel kind of weird. I have a terrible time personally with daylight savings time. And it doesn't matter which way we're going. If we're going forward or we're going back, I always feel off for like a week.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to regulate for sure.
So why don't you tell us how much sleep we actually need? So we've talked about how important this is and the hormonal balance. How many hours of sleep should we be getting a night as adults?
At least 7 hours, and preferably 8 hours, which you may have already heard that. Younger people in their teens, they need more because they're doing much more cognitive work.
Right.
They're growing quite a bit. And then people who are older sometimes need a little bit less. Those that are suffering with chronic illness, such as chronic digestive issues, often need more sleep. And so you might find that if that's you, that you actually don't function well because, or unless you're getting, 8 to 9, 10 hours of sleep. People who have Hashimoto's disease or hypothyroid, they sleep a lot more. And oftentimes because this chronic illness is causing a lot more activity in the brain because your brain has to work harder, right? There's a lot more inflammation going on in the body, and that inflammation is causing basically cell damage and byproducts, and there's just a lot more waste basically that needs to be cleaned up.
You need a little extra time to clean all that stuff up and rebuild tissues.
Yeah, I definitely am one of those people that function a lot better on 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
So
how often are you getting that these days?
Not very often, unfortunately.
Well, that's what happens when you have a child. I was going to say a child under the age of 1, but that can last for more years. Sorry, you're in for it for a while.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. Oh, and then I also wanted to mention that a real sweet spot is actually 7.5 hours. Okay. And the reason why is because our sleep cycles on average last 90 minutes total to go from stage 1 all the way to stage 4 and then start all over again. So every 90 minutes we're cycling through those 4 sleep stages. And 90 minutes times 5 is 7.5 hours. And so ideally in research, they found that if you can get through 5 sleep stages, that's the most protective against like Alzheimer's or aging and just being able to function optimally during the day.
I think that's about what I get on average. Like if I don't have anything that I have to get up for in the evening and I just go to bed at a normal time and let myself wake up at a normal time, it's about 7.5 hours. Yeah. That's about right.
That's good. But I know that there's a lot of people out there, and people listening that might feel like, oh, 6 is plenty or 6.5, that's exactly how much works for you. But they've done enough research that shows that even if you feel like you're functioning at 6 or 6.5, that actually does catch up to you over the years, and that it does cause aging, and it does make you more susceptible to having Alzheimer's or dementia or cognitive issues when you get older.
That's no good. Definitely. I mean, that's a kind of a rising epidemic in this culture. So something we would definitely want to avoid. And that's the thing about chronic illnesses, especially ones that are degenerative that happen in our later years. It is kind of a buildup of all these things that we do throughout our lifetime. So prevention really happens when you're young. And I think that's an important thing for people to recognize. So I think we're going to go now into what happens when we're sleep deprived on a regular basis. So our bodies can definitely respond to sleep deprivation with some pretty significant health issues. Dr. Haylee already mentioned some of the metabolic consequences, but there are quite a few others. So the first is that this is a really stressful state for your body to be in. When you're not sleeping enough, you're kind of requiring that cortisol to be active during more hours of the day than it would naturally be. So if you're not sleeping well or you're not sleeping enough, you're working too late, you're trying to get more things done, you're keeping your cortisol stimulated and higher during the times when your melatonin should be higher. So, when you're keeping yourself awake or you're working on your computer until 11 o'clock at night, that cortisol is going to be elevated for longer in the day. And that affects our metabolism. So when you have elevated cortisol, you are actually cortisol causes proteins and fats from your bloodstream and your skeletal muscle to be sent to your liver to make blood sugar. So you can actually cause blood sugar dysregulation by being chronically stressed, and you can cause chronic stress by not sleeping enough. So it activates that pathway that communicates from your brain to your adrenal glands, and your adrenal glands produce those stress hormones. Some other things that can happen, we already talked a little bit about lack of sleep increasing appetite. So can stimulate that hunger hormone, your ghrelin, and suppress your satiation hormone, your I'm full, stop eating hormone, which is your leptin. It can also increase inflammation in your body and increase the risk of chronic conditions like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and in general can just shorten your lifespan. People who get less sleep tend not to live as long. So perhaps because of some of these degenerative chronic conditions that we're talking about. But this is important. I mean, this is when our bodies restore themselves. And in order to, live a long life, you need that restorative tissue rebuilding and rest.
So you've said a lot about how this can help us in general. And how does lack of sleep affect fertility and pregnancy directly?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the big things is hormone imbalances. So we've talked in previous episodes. I know we definitely talked last week when we talked about sugar. We talked about how, eating a lot of sugar and refined carbs can stimulate cortisol, and now how lack of sleep can also stimulate cortisol. And cortisol can cause imbalances in our endocrine system. So it can mess up our hormonal balance and cause imbalances between like estrogen and progesterone. So if you're experiencing things like maybe a defect in your luteal phase, the second half of your cycle isn't long enough to support a pregnancy, that could be a sign of hormone imbalance. And one reason could be lack of sleep. There are several things that could cause that. But hormone imbalance is definitely one of those. We also talked about how melatonin kind of regulates the timing of our cycle. So we can end up with irregularities in our menstrual cycle. So it could either be shorter or longer if we're not sleeping on a regular basis. I know for me personally, when I don't get a lot of sleep, my stress goes through the roof. And when my stress goes through the roof, my cycle is actually longer. So it lengthens the first half of my cycle and actually typically shortens the second half of my cycle.
Interesting. I'm sure you're not the only one that has experienced that.
I'm sure I'm not. I'm sure several people listening are also experiencing that. So, I mean, if you are noticing that first half of your cycle is kind of longer and you're experiencing a shorter second half of your menstrual cycle, lack of sleep could definitely be a culprit, along with some other things, but definitely a lifestyle change to consider. So some other things in men, actually, we should mention that lack of sleep has been shown in studies to decrease semen quality. So if you're a couple that might be, you've had a semen analysis and you know that there are some parameters that need some work, there are lots of things that you can do to improve that, but sleeping more is definitely one of them. Another is, we talked about blood sugar dysregulation. So when your blood sugar is out of balance and you're experiencing all this cortisol, you can end up with insulin resistance. We talked about last week how harmful insulin resistance is to the hormonal balance in our ovaries, but it can also reduce egg quality by causing inflammation in the body. And then during pregnancy, they've done some studies on lack of sleep in pregnancy, and they found that it does impair glucose tolerance. So it can increase the risk of gestational diabetes, which is definitely no fun. In late pregnancy, if you're sleeping less than 6 hours a night in late pregnancy, like in the third trimester, can actually increase your risk of having a long labor and even a C-section birth.
Oh,
yeah. Definitely. And then last, there isn't as much evidence to support a direct correlation with preeclampsia, but we do know that lack of sleep increases inflammation in the body. And then there are these inflammation-mediated conditions like preeclampsia, low birth weight, fetal growth restriction, preterm birth.
So I know that in the third trimester, that's why I said, it's because I would say most women don't get very good sleep in the third trimester.
Well, they're uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, and you're peeing like every 2 hours, right?
Yeah, that's a form of being uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. So, but there are certain things that you can do in that third trimester to be able to get better sleep. And so if that's you, or like on your way to that third trimester, you're going to get there, to definitely focus on getting that 6 hours of sleep. And it doesn't have to be consecutive, but at least, like I said, 90 minutes at a time, or at least get those through that sleep stage, through the 4 sleep stages, if you can. That's important. So obviously not getting enough sleep is a problem for both our overall health and our fertility. And so what type of things, we're going to talk about what type of things are causing us to get less sleep, and then what we can actually do about it. So, when you actually go to bed and, so what you want to do is actually go to bed and wake up around the same time each day. So we've been talking a lot about the circadian rhythms and how inconsistent sleep and wake cycles can be disruptive to your hormones and everything we just talked about. One easy way to be able to help correct this is going to sleep around the same time. So anytime between 10 and 11 p.m. at the latest. If you can go to bed earlier than that, that'd be great. And then waking up consistently at the same time. So if you work nights or have a non-standard work schedule that's fluctuating all the time, do the best that you can to be able to be as consistent as you can. Our body just loves consistency and works a lot better if you kind of force it into this nice circadian rhythm that it loves so much. And then another way to be able to reduce that cortisol production, especially later in the day, so you can be able to build up that melatonin at night and get a better chance of being able to fall asleep quicker, is don't exercise intensely late at night. Exercise increases our cortisol levels. And so you might find that if you are exercising at night, especially like after 6 p.m., that your cortisol is too high and you actually won't be able to get to sleep as quickly. Avoid working late at night. I think all of us can attest to that. Definitely
Right
Kristin and I too.
Oh, I had a terrible habit of doing that when I worked in corporate finance, because we worked with people all over the world. So I would get emails, and I had this really bad habit of having my computer open. And so I would see when I got work emails, and
yeah, so I
don't do that. It's bad.
A lot of us can attest to that. And so this is one area where it just requires a lot of discipline, that we need to shut off our computer, shut off our phones, put them on airplane mode, do whatever we can at a certain time, like at 9 p.m. and just say, nope, this time's for me. This time, I'm going to actually have a physical book and not like an audible book or something, something that you can physically touch and see, and then isn't an electronic.
Like something with a backlit screen.
Yeah. And so that blue light from the screens on our computer actually inhibits the production of melatonin. And so that is going to be really detrimental to you being able to get to sleep, especially if you have sleep problems. Then this is one place you'll definitely want to explore. And there are apps that if you're like, well, it gets dark at 5 p.m. at night, and of course I need to be on my computer. One thing that you can do is get those like amber colored glasses that block out the blue light. And then there's apps that you can download on your computer and on your phone that actually dim that blue light out of off of the screen. And so when you are staring at it, it's really downplaying how much blue light you're getting.
iPhones have that built in now. I think it's called night shift. You can go to your settings on your phone and just enable that. And it's really great. You can choose how warm you want the light to be. So basically that means how orange does my screen look? And then you can adjust the brightness and then set it either to like a specific time that you want it to come on, or you can just have it do like sunset to sunrise.
That's genius.
And the blue light glasses are fabulous. Like if you just go to Amazon and search for blue blockers or blue blocking glasses, you can find them on Amazon for like $10. I wear glasses. So at first it was kind of annoying. I was like, oh, I have to be wearing contacts. But then I found fit overs. So you can actually put them over your glasses. And pretty much I put those on probably around 8 p.m. every night. And then if I'm watching TV or I'm on my computer, I find that I don't feel as stimulated by that light. I also have software that dims my computer, so it's like double duty if I'm working on the computer at night, but it really helps me sleep. It really helps me sleep. I'm definitely one of those like cortisol stimulated way too late in the evening. If I'm working too late, I have a terrible time sleeping, and blue blockers have totally saved me. So this is a really cheap thing that you can do, and it's a great investment in your sleep and improving your lifestyle.
Don't worry about looking funny.
Oh, yeah. I look totally funny. I'm just gonna like post a picture on Instagram of me wearing my blue blockers.
That'd be great.
So normalize it. Make us not
I have
feel weird.
some too. I actually don't wear them as much as I should, but I'm kind of the opposite of Kristin, where I can fall asleep pretty much anywhere. I'm like the low cortisol.
Wouldn't that be nice? Jeez.
Yeah, on most nights I can actually just fall asleep. But yeah, that's my problem, is I sleep too much, it seems like. So that's a really good advice. And then another way that you can get your cortisol up in the morning time, so speaking of me, is that you can get up a little bit earlier. Make sure your shades are open and you have that fresh sunlight. If you're in the Northwest, you might not be getting any of that, but get the daylight, that natural sunlight. When it goes into your eyes, it actually does stimulate that cortisol production. And so having like a morning walk, going on a walk in the morning is really helpful. And then exercising earlier in the morning, like we said, that exercise increases cortisol levels. That could be really helpful. And just try not to overdo it, because if you're not producing cortisol very well, which could be a sign of like adrenal fatigue or a symptom of, then it can actually make you more tired. But just for some people, having exercise in the morning or going on a morning run can be really helpful. And then Kristin's going to talk to us about some things that we can do in order to help with melatonin production.
Yeah, so in the evenings, one of the best things that we can do is dim the lights a few hours before bed. So, we talked about how blue light can be really stimulating to cortisol production and can keep us awake, but we actually have light sensors in our skin even. So when you got, bright lights on in your living room and you're watching TV, I mean, you're really doing yourself a disservice to your melatonin production. So just kind of quiet down the house and dim the lights, maybe 2 to 3 hours at least before you want to go to bed. Light some candles. Yeah.
Have some essential oils going.
I mean, if you think about it, before we had electricity, I mean, when our bodies were in a more natural state, all we would have had at night was firelight. So, you want to mimic that with burning candles. Just make sure they're not scented candles.
Right.
But yeah, definitely keeping the lights low in the evening is really helpful. Keeping your sleep environment completely dark. So a lot of people, you might have blinds in your room, but you still get kind of street lamp light from outside. That can actually kind of prevent you from producing enough melatonin if you're being exposed to some of that light. It can also just be generally disruptive. We're kind of more cave-like sleepers. So keeping things completely dark. I have room darkening shades in my room. I bought them for like $30 on Amazon. Once again, kind of another inexpensive way to optimize your sleep environment so that you're able to get a little bit more rest. Other things are making sure that there aren't any electronic lights. Like I have a smoke alarm in my room. I have to tape the little green light so that it doesn't bother me, because I have room darkening shades. So anything in my room that's blinking or flashing is going to be really bright. Yeah. So alarm clock displays, things like that, just stick something over it. Don't keep your electronics in your room. Just keep the computer plugged in a different room. You can keep your phone plugged in a different room. If you absolutely have to use it for an alarm clock, you can just put it on airplane mode and make sure that it's not right next to your bed.
So the purpose behind that, are you thinking that the EMFs or the electromagnetic frequencies could potentially be messing with like brain waves and just be irritating?
Can. Yeah, it can disrupt your sleep to have your electronics in your bedroom and just being exposed to that EMF. Honestly, turning off your Wi-Fi in your house at night is another really good idea. We are electronic beings. I think a lot of people think the studies and the science on EMF is a little woo-woo, but it's not. I mean, we are electronic in nature. And so when we have exposure to those kinds of frequencies all day long, and we also have it all night long, that can be disruptive. So just give yourself a break, turn your Wi-Fi off and don't keep electronics in your room.
Yeah, I think this is especially important if you're one that has trouble sleeping. You might be a bit more sensitive to those. And so if you're wondering like, oh, why can't I sleep? This is waking up in the middle of the night. That's just one thing that you can experiment with and see if that does actually help you sleep better.
Yeah, definitely. So there are also some supplements that we can consider using in the evenings to kind of help support melatonin production and support a state of relaxation. I mean, sleep is very parasympathetic. It's that kind of rest and digest state of your body, and you definitely need to be calm in order to allow that to happen. So one thing that can really help is magnesium in the evenings, in particular magnesium glycinate. Glycine is a really calming nutrient. We talked about that a little bit in the genetics podcast that we did 2 weeks ago. But the combination of the magnesium and the glycinate is really fabulous for sleep. So you can just take that, like 1 scoop of powder in a little glass of water before bed. There's some evidence that magnesium along with zinc is actually essential for the synthesis of melatonin inside your body. So that may be one of the reasons that magnesium works so well for us. Another calming nutrient is phosphatidylserine. If you are an overproducer of cortisol, you may find this nutrient particularly helpful. It can kind of help modulate, it's nourishing for the adrenals, and it can help modulate your cortisol production. Another thing that you can try is melatonin. So melatonin has been shown to have an antioxidant effect, and there have been some studies that have shown greater chance of pregnancy in women who are supplementing with melatonin. It may work for you, it may not. Melatonin is a hormone. So if you're supplementing and you don't actually need to be taking exogenous melatonin, it could actually disrupt your sleep, but it could also be helpful. So there are studies showing benefit at 3 milligrams every night before bed can be helpful for women going through IVF and increasing the chance of pregnancy. Some people respond to really small amounts of melatonin, like we were talking about 0.5 milligram, or some
0.5.
people, 0.5 milligrams, and some people may need more. They might need like 6 milligrams. So this is one of those supplements where if you're going to use melatonin, you need to make sure that you kind of listen to your body. Don't just take it because you think it's going to improve egg health or increase your chance of pregnancy. Really pay attention to how it's acting in your body and how it's making you feel.
Yeah, it could be really helpful for some, and some it could be, it could really disrupt your sleep. And so,
And your cycle.
Yeah, and your cycle, and it can make you more groggy the next day. And so just again, like what Kristin was saying, don't just continue to take it because you want to get pregnant, but maybe that's not the thing for you.
Right.
But for those who really need it, it can be really helpful.
Well, and another great option, actually, if you don't respond well to melatonin, is a supplement called 5-HTP, which stands for 5-hydroxytryptophan. So this is a precursor to serotonin in your brain, and serotonin is a precursor to melatonin. So 5-HTP taken in the evenings, you could kind of divide your dose up and take a little bit like right around dinner time, and then take some before bed. But about 1 to 300 milligrams of 5-HTP 30 to 45 minutes before bed can really help you kind of naturally increase your own production of melatonin instead of taking melatonin in a supplement itself. So 5-HTP is great. I've used that in the past to help me sleep. This episode seems to be really applicable to my my own particular sleep situation. This is a struggle area for me, definitely. So happy to be able to bring some of this knowledge to you. Some other things that can help are herbs. You may have heard of like valerian root. You could do that in tea. You could do it in a tincture. I think they have capsules of it as well. Lots of different ways to take that. Skullcap is another one. If you have issues with kind of ruminating thoughts, like circular thoughts at night, skullcap is they call it a calming nervine in herbal medicine, and it can be really helpful. I have a bottle of that in my bathroom. And then passion flower can also be really helpful for sleep. And then we already kind of talked a little bit about having an overly stimulating sleep environment, like having the electronics or TV in your bedroom. I mean, really, your bedroom should be for sleep and for sex. And those are pretty much the only two things that you should be doing in there. So I don't recommend keeping a desk or an office in there, like working in there on a regular basis, working while you're laying in bed, watching TV while you're laying in bed. We always used to have a TV in our bedroom, but we have since, it's still in there, but it's totally unplugged. We don't ever use it anymore. And then just keeping your room a little bit on the cool side. We're kind of meant to sleep in a cooler environment. So making sure that you're not overly warm, that you're not waking up sweating or anything during the night. And
so the temperature is 68 degrees.
68.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That the research is on.
That's ideal for us, which is definitely cooler than I would prefer to have it in the house during the day. So making sure that, you're not blasting your heat at night is a really good tactic there. So also making sure that your bed is comfortable and your pillows are comfortable. Don't sleep on worn out pillows, just because you don't want to go buy new ones. Just not being comfortable at night can absolutely affect your sleep quality and, prevent how much you're able to get. So last but not least, being on a blood sugar roller coaster all day. So we talked last week about eating sugar and refined carbohydrates. This is especially damaging to us at night. But if you're on that, like spiking your blood sugar, eating candy bars during the day, and you're dropping and spiking and dropping, this totally messes up your cortisol rhythm throughout the day. And you're going to be tired in the afternoon, and you're probably going to be wired at night. So just making sure that you're adjusting your diet. If you're a caffeine drinker, or you're drinking a lot of caffeine, I should say, 1 or 2 cups of coffee even in the morning shouldn't be too disruptive for you. But if you're drinking coffee after 3 p.m., you're probably not doing yourself any favors in the sleep department. Depending on how sensitive you are to caffeine, you may even need to quit drinking coffee earlier than that. So not visiting the break room at 2 or 3 o'clock when you have that crash, just trying to get more consistent with your sugar and stimulant intake. Avoid drinking alcohol before bed. Alcohol might seem like it helps you get to sleep, but it does not do you any favors in the sleep quality department. You can absolutely cause yourself to have low blood sugar in the middle of the night drinking alcohol, because it'll spike your blood sugar and then you'll drop out. So if you're drinking alcohol and waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and having a hard time going back to sleep, probably not helping you.
I would say the same thing with eating sugar at night. It's really common to have a dessert after dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes people will have dinner and then wait about an hour and then, dive into that ice cream or the cobbler, leftover Thanksgiving pie. And that, and then maybe that with a glass of wine. But you need to realize is that is typically straight sugar, and and what it's happening is that you'll go to bed and your blood sugar spikes and then it drops and then you'll wake up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And so if you're wondering why in the heck do I keep waking up in the middle of the night, get rid of the dessert at night, or, have it at a different time during the day and then choose a different type of dessert.
Yeah, sugar and simple carbs at night are definitely not a good idea. Now, some people do better with more carbohydrate in the evening in general, but we're talking complex carbohydrates, like eating sweet potatoes with dinner, not eating a cookie and ice cream after.
Yeah, you can do things like maybe a fourth a cup of berries at night, or do like a coconut milk. There's lots of recipes online, like look up like paleo dessert recipes. If you have to have that and you have that sweet tooth going, we're not saying like don't do it at all, but even like a square of really dark chocolate can be just perfect. But I would say if you're waking up in the middle of the night, that's definitely one place to look.
Yeah, and dark chocolate, actually, I used to do that a lot at night, but it does have some caffeine in it. Really dark chocolate
true,
does have
actually.
some caffeine.
Kristin has a point, so that may not be the best option.
One square, it depends on how sensitive you are to caffeine.
Right.
If you're not super sensitive to caffeine, you're probably not going to be bothered by a 70 to 80% cacao piece of chocolate, but you might be. So if you're noticing that and chocolate is all you're doing in the evening, you might want to consider moving that to a different time of day.
Right.
And then there are a couple of other things that can cause sleep disruptions. So Dr. Haylee, why don't you talk about like some of the health conditions that someone might be experiencing that may still cause them to have poor sleep, even if they're not doing some of these other things that we talked about?
Right. So a big cause of sleep disturbance is going to be things like anxiety or depression. Anxiety, of course, can keep you up at night, and that might be where adaptogenic type of herbs can be really helpful. Definitely work with the doctor to try to get to the root cause of that anxiety. It could be a biological, or a physical cause. So maybe some nutrient deficiencies, or it could just be, again, in your head, that type of anxiety, which can be really, there's a lot of great things that you can do, such as counseling, or again, those like herbs can be helpful. Same with depression. A sign of depression is just sleeping too much. And it could also be hypothyroidism, which depression is a symptom of. So if your thyroid isn't working quite right and you're wondering why you're so dang tired, or your mood is down, right? Go to your doctor, get your thyroid checked. And then drugs, like medications such as antidepressants, amphetamines, dopamine agonists, cold medicines, etc., can definitely be disruptive to your sleep. And so if you're finding that ever since you started that medication and you're just not sleeping as well, you're not getting to sleep, waking up in the middle of the night, feeling like crap in the morning, then you want to, again, reevaluate what kind of medications you're taking and see if you can make a switch.
And considering some natural options too can be really helpful. So
yes.
Finding a practitioner that can help you take a good critical look at what you're taking versus what other things might work for you. Diet and lifestyle can help with a lot of these types of conditions, depression, hypothyroidism. So there are a lot of options here.
Right.
So I think that's going to cover it for this week. Anything else you wanted to say about sleep before we wrap things up?
I think we did a good overview.
I think so. Okay, so a couple of things before we let you go. We do want to let you know that next week on the podcast, we will be talking about prenatal supplements. So things that you need to start during preconception, adding to your supplement routine to make sure that you and your future baby have the best nutrition possible, starting at that very early stage of pregnancy. So we're going to talk about all of the things that we recommend beyond just a prenatal vitamin. So this is definitely one you won't want to miss. If you're not already subscribed to the podcast, definitely do so you'll know when we have that new episode out for you. We also are developing some new content for you guys. We're very excited to be working on this in the month of December, and we will be bringing you a free training in January on 5 proven ways to get pregnant faster and have a healthier baby. So this is some really awesome research supported and also clinically experienced supported information that we have to give you on the 5 things that we feel are kind of the most important things to consider when you're preparing for pregnancy. So this applies to women who are maybe thinking about getting pregnant in the next year, or even women that have been trying for a while. This information can definitely help you. So we highly recommend getting on our email list so that you will know exactly when that free training is available. You can head over to our website at tinyfeet.co and download our free guide. We have a quick start fertility guide, which will also help you get started on some of this diet and lifestyle stuff that you can be doing. And you can also access that through the link in our Instagram profile. So if you want to follow us along on Instagram, we have a lot of educational content. We release all of our blogs and announce all of that when we have new stuff on Instagram. So follow us along there. And lastly, we want to let you know that our Tiny Feet fertility assessment is still $29.99 through the end of the year. So it is normally $97. So this is an amazing deal that you guys can take advantage of in the next month to help get you started preparing for pregnancy. So I think that's going to do it for this week. We look forward to seeing you back next week for prenatal supplements, and we'll talk to you soon.